William has now become an Order of the Bath, whatever that is. I'm sure it's very worthwhile having. And it's not just outstanding achievement monarchy celebrates, it's also extraordinary bravery. King Charles has got 31 medals, at least, I've lost count, at least 31 medals. What extraordinary bravery he must have shown to achieve all these medals. He is a 5-star general in the army, a 5-star air marshal in the Air Force, a 5-star admiral in the Navy. That's only fair because he did captain a coastal minesweeper several decades ago for a short period. And he's only crashed a plane once. So that's fair enough, isn't it? You may ask where all these medals come from. They come from themselves, because the royal family is so arrogant and self-serving, they give themselves medals. That's what they get them. I think it's quite a good idea. I'm going to get myself a medal as most honourable keeper of the belfry. Sounds nice, isn't it? I've done nothing to deserve it, mind you, but that doesn't stop the royal family giving themselves medals. They do all the time. But what an absurd royal family we have. I mean, monarchies generally are a bit absurd, but this one's particularly absurd. It's the last imperial monarchy in Europe. Other monarchies have at least tried to adapt to the democratic system within which they live. The King of Norway, for example, had to take an oath of allegiance to the Norwegian constitution before he could take his throne. Over here in this country, we are still subjects, not citizens, and we have to take an oath to them. As a member of Parliament for 18 years, I wasn't able to take my seat in Commons until I'd taken an oath of allegiance to the unelected head of state. What a curious arrangement for a democracy to operate. Absurd, you know. And let us say in the theoretical world we have a general election and the political party stands on the platform of abolishing the monarchy and they secured the majority of seats in the Commons. They all then, members of that party committed to abolition, have to take an oath of allegiance to the unelected head of state, notwithstanding their manifesto which were elected, called for abolition. That's British democracy for you. I've also made the point out there about tourism. Whenever I go on television and radio programs about the monarchy, I'm told that they're wonderful for tourism. Look at all these people who are coming here to see the royal family. I don't know if you know what the most popular palace in Europe is for visitors. Thank you. Palace of Versailles. And the French abolished the monarchy in 1848. So I think probably that argument doesn't stand up very well. Now, this is also not just a monarchy that gives itself medals. It's a monarchy that spouts law out for itself. You better be aware of this. It's in my book, by the way, quick access to my book, which is called, What Do You Do? Because that's what the royal family asks you when you meet. What do they do? I think might be more about. If you don't answer the question satisfactorily, the second question is, have you come far? To which the answer should be quite far, and that's the end of the conversation. But the perks the royal family gets are not simply the numerous palaces, acres and acres of fruit, which they have in this country, we pay for, by the way, we pay for. But it's also the ability to change the law. Now, you may not be aware of this, but there's something called king's consent. And something even more dubious called prince's consent, applied to the Prince of Wales. And when legislation is brought forward which affects their private interest, then they are consulted on that legislation before Parliament sees it and changes the made legislation by the government to accommodate the wishes of the royal family, of the King and the Prince of Wales. Now, we're told that nothing has changed, but what happens is a telephone conversation. The potential bills change, and then when it's being changed to satisfy the royal family, it's then sent formally to the palace, who then sign it off. And the argument then is, well, they haven't changed anything. No, because they did all the telephone conversations between the Cabinet Office and the palace beforehand. and they exempt themselves from legislation. Nobody else can do that. It'd be quite nice to do that, wouldn't it? Exempt yourself from legislation you don't like. For example, the Animal Welfare Act was passing through Parliament when I was a member there. The Animal Welfare Act gives the right to the RSPCA to go onto private land where they believe an animal welfare offence has been committed. But, as a consequence of pressure from the palace, private royal lands are excluded. So even the RSPCA believes, the reason I think it's true, but if it's believed that cruelty to animals is taking place in royal lands, they cannot enter it. The list of exemptions from legislation is extraordinary. The King and the Prince of Wales have been exempted from the terms of the Nuclear Explosions Act. So presumably, William get his Premiership Set Act with the knowledge that he won't be prosecuted for setting up a nuclear bomb. This is absurd. Why do they want exemption from these sorts of things? So that's one aspect that is quite wrong. Because it all relates to the fact that the royal family has not changed and still operates as it did hundreds of years ago in this country. But the most egregious aspect of the whole thing, apart from the lack of democratic accountability, is the finance. We have my friend from Holland. I won't defend the Dutch royal family, but what I would say is they're a lot cheaper than the British royal family. And they are. Everybody's cheaper than the British royal family. The civil list produced which funded the royal family in 2011 was 7.9 million from the public purse. The sovereign grant which replaced it this year gave the royal £85 million. That's a nice bit of inflation for you over those years. And why has it gone up so much? Because George Osborne, the Chancellor, a bit of an idiot, I'm afraid, decided to link the royal finances with the income from the Crown Estate. And the Crown Estate is a property company, and which always produces returns above the rate of inflation. And the Crown Estate owns, for example, the seabed around this country. So all these wind farms which are going up around Britain to give us clean energy transport, all these wind farms, the Crown Estate's money comes in, and a quarter of it goes to the royal family. A quarter of the money that should go to the taxpayer into the treasury is going straight to one of the richest families in the country who've done nothing to deserve it whatsoever. And it's not simply the money in the Crown Estates that goes to the royal family, it's not simply the sovereign grant, it's exemptions from taxation, the exemption from inheritance tax. No inheritance tax was paid on the private possessions of the Queen, which were handed over to Charles. Not the public ones, I'm talking about Buckingham Palace, I'm talking about the private possessions. The string of race horses, the £100 million stamp collection, the painting, the artworks. No inheritance tax was paid on that, and no inheritance tax was paid when the Queen Mother died and handed her possessions to the Queen. Why should the royal family be exempt from inheritance tax in this country when nobody else is? Then you look at the duchies, Duchy of Cornwall and the Duchy of Lancaster, which are royal slush funds. That's what they are, royal slush funds. Those duchies should have been handed along with the rest of the crown properties to the government in 1760. The only reason they weren't is because they were valueless at that time. The Duchy of Lancaster, which is that one, was estimated to produce a return for the monarch of less than £1 that year, so they were ignored. They are now multi-million-pound operations that provide a £20 million plus slush fund income for the King of the Duchy of Lancaster and a slush fund for the Duchy of Cornwall for Prince of Wales. Now, Prince of Wales argues, and Charles argues very carefully and very assiduously, that the Duchy of Cornwall is so-called private estate. It's not public at all, it's a private estate. Notwithstanding, it's been held responsible for particular infringements by people like the Environment Agency, which could only apply to public-owned land. But if it's a private estate, why are they paying no capital gains tax? Why are they paying no tax estates pay, which are other private estates in this country. They want it both ways. They want all the benefits of privacy and secrecy, and they also want exemption from tax that would apply to a public arena. And that is what they do. They maximise their income at our expense. You know, the royal family was worth nothing in 1760. That's why George III came to the agreement with the Parliament of the day. Now they are worth billions and billions and billions. Where does that money come from? It's not come from their own endeavours. It hasn't been winning in a horse race, has it? It's come from public purse. It's come from exemption from taxation. It's come from overseas countries that have exploited. That's where it's come from. It is dirty money. It should not belong to them. Now, you might have seen that Charles are going to charge you money to go and tour Balmoral. £100 a time, I think, to go and see a couple of rooms. We should have done the same with the Council of May up in the north of Scotland, one of the other hundreds of houses which they all got access to. Well, they used to. £100. Balmoral, a private estate, so he says, like Sandringham, a private estate. Why are these estates private? Why have they got them in the first place when they were bankrupt in 1760? The answer is that Prince Albert, on behalf of Queen Victoria, went to the government of the day and said, we haven't got any money, we're desperately short of money, you must increase the amount of money that comes from the ordinary person in the street and give it to us. That's what you have to do. Otherwise we can't carry out our duties. Well, they never carried them out anyway properly in those days, or now. But that's what they said. So the government of the day said, okay, Your Honour, your king, the monarch, you must have what you want. And they gave them a huge amount of money in order to make up the shortfall which they'd been told existed. That shortfall didn't exist at all. The money that was given by Parliament to Prince Albert and Queen Victoria was used not for them to carry out their duties, but to buy Balmoral and Sandringham and Osborne House in the Isle of Wight. There's a phrase really for when you take money from the public purse and use it for the wrong reasons. And I know this is an MP. It's called fitting their expenses. That's what they were doing, fitting their expenses. Those properties should belong to us, not to the royal family. They were procured under false pretenses in Victorian times. So the duchies should be returned to the Crown Estates, and the Crown Estates should be separated, as it was from 1760 to 2011, from the royal family. It's called the Crown Estates, it's a misleading term. They were publicly owned assets given to the country in 1760, and it's quite wrong that the monarchy derives money from the Crown Estates these days. So the duchies should be returned to the public purse, they should be returned to the Crown Estates. So I said to Charles, pass a duchy to the Crown Estate. That's a musical joke, by the way. Now we're told in this country that, that almost half the population at any one time favours the abolition of the monarchy. At the very least, even the monarchy at its most popular, 25% of the population want the monarchy to go. Now there are 650 MPs in the House of Commons, so even the 25% who do our maths properly, that's about 170 MPs, 160 MPs who ought to be Republican. But how many can you find that will actually come out and say anything? When I was a member of Parliament, there was about 5 of us who would say anything from the Labour and Lib Dem parties, no from the Conservative Party, of course. Where are they now? I don't think I know any MPs, apart from possibly Chris Bryant, who share this view publicly. But you know, when you speak to them privately, they all say how terrible it is, and how the monarchy doesn't make any sense, and how it really should be changed. Either changed or abolished. But they won't say so publicly because they're frightened of losing votes. Typical for me was Charles Kennedy, my old leader.